You know, when I first got to San Francisco in 2010, I originally stayed in an abandoned church. And the abandoned church was in a neighborhood called the Great Pearl. Have you ever heard of the Great Pearl? See, they tried to recharacterize it later after they tortured me and sent me to something called PES and lied and said that what was happening was a chemical imbalance because of mental illness as opposed to intentional neurochemical interference as the target of directed energy weapons. And so then they recharacterized me and sent me back to the Great Pearl. And the next time I went back, I was in a group home for people that were being observed as part of alleged psychiatric treatment while they were being programmed to be stabilized into the regime that existed within the city and county of San Francisco at that time, which was at the onset of the Affordable Care Act. Anybody who's anybody knows that a great deal of the foundation for what was identified as the mental health, specifically mental health related programming, identified as part of the Affordable Care Act, was modeled on the program they had in San Francisco. It's one of the reasons I was exported to San Francisco at the time I was, in the manner I was. But before, I was in an abandoned church, and it became a prize. I became a prize at the time that I was considered to be a part of a group of people that had already been determined to be participants in a completely subordinated role. We were not allowed to worship as we wanted. We were not allowed to engage with the people we wanted when we wanted to. We weren't allowed to have any leadership. Somebody else had already determined who and what we were going to be. And if we did something that exposed we were capable of consciousness or engagement on the levels they had claimed as their own, well, you end up in PES at just the right time with everybody lying to you the entire rest of the time you're still in the city and county. It's called the Great Pearl. There were shops around there. There were churches around there, different from the one that I was staying in some manners. I found an old wind chime. There was a couple of things that were still remaining in the church. They had a piano in the basement. I found a book of hymns that had the piano part and the words. And there was a wind chime, one of the most beautiful wind chimes. The sounds of it were harrowing, was unlike anything ever. For a short time, I actually put it outside so that I could hear it when the wind would blow. And when I ended up getting a place to stay inside, even after I finished my programming, I took it with me. I had it the whole time I was in San Francisco, including when I was on Treasure Island. They had already determined that the people they had determined that were supposed to be availed of whatever we were capable of were going to get it as a payoff for keeping their mouths shut about all the other crime they had committed to. I wasn't actually Russian, or am I? I wasn't actually from a country, the former Soviet Union, or was I? How far back in the family line does one have to go to prove that they're available as a target for ethnic cleansing? My understanding is when the nation of Israel was formed, an understanding of one's entitlement to citizenship was based on the standards Hitler applied when he determined who was eligible for extermination. There's a reason why the Supreme Court of the United States hasn't overturned the executive orders and the mandates that Trump put into effect concerning certain countries that were banned. The standards everyone kept trying to argue were the same standards Hitler used to identify his victims. Is that enough to disqualify you in perpetuity from political representation on your own terms? It was February of 2010. They cast a horrible spell in San Francisco. I saw it, and they punished me for seeing them cast that spell. Who are these Russian spies, woman? How far back do you think you're entitled to rape us in our ancestry and blame it on somebody else? See, I wasn't Russian insofar as I ever knew, but I have been treated like a Russian, and the expectation is that I'm supposed to shut up and let these guys and the women they've chosen, because they shut up and pay attention to them the way they want them to. They have the derivative conversations. They're willing to play the sugar. That's allowed to be American. It's allowed to be American enough to have political representation. I'm treated like an undocumented immigrant who's been stripped of her citizenship and meant to act as if she is some sort of refugee in a foreign country, despite the fact that this is my country. I can hear you! I just heard you! I just heard you! You're pissed! I'm not your fucking option, asshole! I don't think these Russian spies are even fucking Russians. I think a majority of who they are actually Americans that just didn't want to vote for Barack Obama and just didn't want to vote for Hillary Clinton and might have actually had what would have been used as evidence in a criminal conviction against them were somebody not to have agreed to cover up for the crimes they were involved with. What are you guys in your counterintelligence doing with information from the Rezko investigation? How many Russians were involved with the shit that went down with Blago and Rezko, guys? If you are actually Russian or Ukrainian or from a former country of the Soviet Union, and you are resident, or you are even by this time a naturalized citizen of the United States, and you wish to run for political office, and you have a respectable political agenda, I hope you know you are under no obligation to cede your life to finance the political campaign of somebody that was allowed to be given somebody else's political capital via their loyalty to the Democratic or Republican parties. It's unconstitutional, and it won't abide. See, it's one of these things where they're like in death throes. Neither the Republican nor the Democratic Party actually have the political capital to sustain their infamy. They will fall by the wayside. But here's the thing. It's the same thing you guys did in 2009. You threw me in with a particular group of people. Then you tried to figure out some way to slander them and me. I never bought that. I never agreed to that, and I still don't. How far back are you willing to make your legacy available for coinage? How far back are you willing to let me and my political allies dispossess you of your inheritance so that other people can use your life for their commerce? Every one of you. Do you feel like you're entitled to negotiate the contract yourself? I asked a senator from the state of Florida during the fall of 2017, I believe, maybe between 2017 and 2018. I said, supposedly there is some discussion in the Senate concerning ethics regarding the election and conversations around election interference. I made a personal request that he discuss sexual ethics. That does not mean you get to have options, or your allies and your party affiliates get to have options on torturing me, because I won't seal their election campaign deals with my own body. I was on the streets during 2018. I know what a lot of the freshmen were inured to. You're not getting away with that again. You're not getting away with it again, even if it's Republican women in steel.